a lot of times when you look back at the history of an organization or of a person, that you can kind of divide it up into different phases. For a lot of people, this period from 2007 to 2014 is sort of a golden age for BioWare. This is the period when the trilogy for Mass Effect released and also the first 3 Dragon Ages. Now, I would argue that the period between late 1999 and 2002, when the Baldur's Gates and Neverwinter Nights released, is another interesting period in BioWare's history. But I think BioWare was a lot more obscure in that period. So I think for a lot of people, this is sort of the period that they think about when they're thinking about BioWare, when they learned about BioWare, when they started playing BioWare games. So let's talk about this period and maybe show why maybe it's not an age exactly, but there are some interesting lessons maybe to be gleaned here. So the first thing to do is to spread things out based upon when they actually release. So let's start just by the year. Mass Effect 1 released in 2007. Dragon Age Origins didn't release until 2009. Then you have Mass Effect 2 in 2010, Dragon Age 2 in 2011, Mass Effect 3 in 2012, and Dragon Age Inquisition out in 2014. So you're starting to see that, okay, maybe this age is a central thing with 2 capstone games. And then if we add on the actual dates when they released and shift things around to line up where they actually were, okay, yeah, that idea of a central group of 4 games is kind of underlined a bit more. So I'm going to take Mass Effect 1 and Dragon Age Inquisition off in a second, because I think it's interesting to look at this center a little bit more closely. But before I do that, I just want to point something out that undermines this whole idea of a golden age to a large degree, I feel. Mass Effect 1 had a development period of about 53 months. That's the length of time from when KOTOR shipped to when Mass Effect 1 shipped. The central leadership team was largely the same team, so that's a pretty long time, more than 4 years to develop the first Mass Effect. In the case of Dragon Age Origins, it's even longer. The time from when Neverwinter Nights shipped until Dragon Age Origins is actually 90 months. So this is more than 7 years. This is a very long period of time. The first lesson to take away from all of this is that the beginning of an age, the beginning of a period, is started because it took a really long time to develop some games. So you end up with this hole. You end up with a gap in your release schedule, which is the case with BioWare. Between KOTOR and Mass Effect, Jade Empire did launch, but even still, there's quite a lot of space between the past part of BioWare and then this period that we're talking about here. Let's zoom in on this central group of 4. So we'll spread it out a little bit. The first thing that jumps out is this right here. Dragon Age Origins and Mass Effect 2 launched less than 3 months apart, basically on top of each other. A couple of reasons for this. Dragon Age Origins actually got delayed during the acquisition by EA to add in consoles, but also Mass Effect 2 was actually late, so they would have been even closer together if that hadn't happened. The lesson that's interesting here is 2 seminal games for BioWare, Dragon Age Origins, which established a new IP, a new setting for fantasy role-playing games, and Mass Effect 2, which is considered by a lot of people to be the best Mass Effect game. It's certainly the best reviewed Mass Effect game, launched effectively on top of each other. And both sold really well. So while I believe that policing your launch schedule is important, while I believe you should care about things like this, while this is probably a terrible idea, ultimately, sometimes launching the game because it's done is the right call. The next thing that I think is worth noticing is how many of these games in this period are true sequels. Now, I've mentioned true sequels in previous videos. I'll probably do a video on true sequels all by itself, but in short, a true sequel is a game where it uses a lot of what came before it. It may use art assets, animation assets, levels. It certainly uses most of the technology, and this allows teams to iterate and move really quickly. For Mass Effect, both Mass Effect 2 and Mass Effect 3 are true sequels built upon the Unreal engine and the foundation laid by Mass Effect 1. There's fairly substantial technological reworks in Mass Effect 2, but it's able to build upon what came before. And due to its incredibly tight timeline, Dragon Age 2 is also a pretty true sequel. Now, it does a bunch of stuff that it probably shouldn't have done around art direction. It builds upon the foundation that it laid with 90 months of development on Dragon Age Origins. The power of true sequels is that it allows you to work more quickly to build upon a tool base that at least partially exists. When you look at Mass Effect, what you see is something quite remarkable. The time between Mass Effect 1 and Mass Effect 2 is 27 months. The time between Mass Effect 2 and Mass Effect 3 is 26 months. It's like a metronome. It's just like bang, 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 bang. The biggest lesson to learn from BioWare's Golden Age, for me, is true sequels really matter. BioWare has stopped, to a large degree, making true sequels. Joplin, which was the original planned Dragon Age 4, would have been a true sequel. But at this point, there's been enough divergence and time and interference from other projects that Dragon Age 4 is not a true sequel, as I've talked about, to Dragon Age Inquisition. And Andromeda, not a true sequel to Mass Effect 3, nor will the next Mass Effect be a true sequel to Andromeda. So ultimately, the lesson here, the thing that allowed BioWare to release 4 games in less than 3 years was a strong foundation built upon an original game with technology that was then reused in a series of true sequels. This is something that I think a lot more studios could learn from. I think true sequels are something that maybe have a bit of a bad rap within the industry. Certainly Ubisoft has probably pounded the concept into the dirt, but I think it's something that would be worth seeing return. We have shirts now. This is High Tea on the High Seas. There will be a shelf below this video if you're interested in buying something. It helps the channel out. Special thanks to my members. They provide the resources that this channel needs to keep running. If you're interested in becoming a member, there will be a link down below. What do you consider BioWare's greatest game? What do you consider the period when BioWare was firing on all cylinders? Is it this period? Is it the earlier period with the Baldur's Gates and the Neverwinter Nights? Let me know that down in the comments. If you found this video interesting, give it a thumbs up, because that lets YouTube know that you enjoyed it, and then they'll spread it to more people, and more people will get a chance to see this. I will see you again soon. Thank you.